pipe down. So we have Dr. Wayne Lewis with us and Ms. Diane Porter, who's the chair of the board, Wayne Lewis, who's the commissioner. And so we're just gonna have a discussion around the agreement between the Board of Education and the state as a whole regarding the testing scores and the new accommodations. So I'm gonna turn this right over to them. I have a question for the both of them, and then I'll have questions as it relates to different individuals. Within the KDE audit and the settlement agreement, numerous issues with special education were identified. What are some of the specific mistakes that have been made in serving the student population, and what particular steps beyond what was required in the settlement will you be taking to correct these problems?
First of all, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I know you had a stand-up opportunity, so you're not restless, but how many people in here are parents? Raise your hand. Okay. How many people in here work for JCPS or another education entity? How many people love education and know how important it is? So for that, I say thank you for being here this morning because your voice matters. So my question is about the ECE corrective action plan. Is that correct? And you asked me what was the...
I asked you what were some particular mistakes that have been made in serving the student population, and what particular steps beyond what's required in the settlement will you be taking to correct them?
Okay, what are some particular steps that will be made? What were some of the things that were cited in the corrective action plan? So in the interest of not messing it up, I don't have the plan with me. We have read the plan, and the board depends on Dr. Polio and staff to manage the work that's in the corrective action plan. One of the things, I could just give an example. I don't know if this is cited in the plan or not. I'll give an example from when I work with the district. We have students who have an individual education plan because they are a special needs child. So it's important that we keep a specific timeline in meeting with parents and going over the plan to make sure that everything is in place. With ECE, there are many things that we must do correctly. There are many things that we must do on time. So it's important for us to do those things, to do them on time, and ECE requires more staff, more opportunities to work with parents, more services to our students, whether it's behavior services, whether it's learning services, or those kinds of things. My commitment on the Board of Education is to see to it that our district works to correct the things that we are not doing well. My position on the board, our responsibility is to see to it that we have funding so that things can happen for our students. If we need consulting teachers or if we need consulting staff in our individual schools, then my question is, are we doing that? How much does it cost for us to do that? It's our responsibility as a board in Jefferson County to supplement the funds that come to us from the state. Sometimes everybody's funds get cut. And if Dr. Lewis's funds get cut, he can't send us the same amount of money. So our board is responsible for finding the funds to supplement so that no services are left behind for our students. Again, our primary customer, our primary goal, our primary love are students. And it's our responsibility to make sure that everything is in place to take care of the needs of our students. I hope that answered some of it. I'll turn it over to Dr. Lewis.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I appreciate the invitation, and I've really enjoyed the opportunity to be here to hear from our panelists and to get to meet and talk with some of you all. To Dr. Rivers' question, I as well, I won't read from the corrective action plan. I will tell you in general terms, with respect to the audit that was recently completed and disseminated, that the findings around special education are among some of the most concerning for us. They were among some of the most concerning for us, and I believe for JCPS as well. It is a role where, according to the terms of the agreement, we will continue to have a much deeper level of partnership with the district around ensuring that our kids with disabilities are in fact identified appropriately and then served well. And so when you think about the corrective action plan, and I know many of you have not taken a look at the corrective action plan, it's an incredibly detailed document. We have talked about over 50 deficiencies noted in the audit. There are almost 400 action steps specific action steps, some with multiple parts that are part of the corrective action plans. There are a lot of things that we have agreed to do together to ensure that kids in Jefferson County, particularly kids with disabilities there, are served appropriately. I am encouraged with the degree of collaboration that we've had with the development of that corrective action plan. I can tell you that with the reports that I had with our team that was working here in JCPS to develop that plan, that it was an incredibly collaborative and collegial process. By the time the plan got to me, Ms. Porter, I don't know if I've actually even told you that, by the time the plan got to me, I actually didn't make one change because I felt like with the work that they had put into that plan and identifying the specific things that need to be addressed, if we can in fact implement that plan with fidelity in the district, there is no way in ECE or in any other area that it does not lead to substantial improvement in JCPS.
Dr. Lewis, you mentioned that there are over 400 action steps. Can you and Ms. Porter both speak to what are some of the policies and initiatives necessary to meet the deficiencies that you mentioned? And then can you draw us a picture of what you expect educational success of the children in JCPS will look like over time?
Well, in the area of ECE, I'll start. One of the specific ones outside of the details of the action steps of the corrective action plan, we requested that JCPS hire an official at the cabinet level who reports directly to Dr. Polio, who would have charge of ECE services. That's a new position. And let me say, just as a side note on this, even in areas that maybe are not detailed in the corrective action plan, such as the job description for that ECE chief, that's been an opportunity where JCPS and our department have in fact worked together on what that job description looks like, on what the qualifications need to be for that person, background and experience, so that we can ensure that we get somebody at the cabinet level reporting directly to the superintendent with the background, experience, expertise necessary to be able to lead reform in that space. I believe that additional position, that role is so central to changing some of the things the deficiencies that we found in the district in the audit.
Thank you. I'll speak a little bit to the position of chief, which Dr. Polio and the board has decided that will be a chief position. In the settlement that we made with the state, it said specifically that there would be a person that was hired to deal with ECE issues. So it is the determination that the person will be a chief that will be on the cabinet. And I would like to support the words of Dr. Lewis in that you're looking for a specific person. Earlier I heard the question about I have credentials and I can't get an opportunity for a particular position. The position of chief for ECE services requires a special certification in ECE, as well as the regular undergraduate degree, a master's degree. Some of folks have superintendent certification, but there is a separate certification specifically for ECE. Director of Special Education. So it's about meeting the requirements, and in my tenure on the board, it's not always easy to find that person with that certification, but we will have the best person in place. I do want to say that this is an opportunity for us to kind of go back in time. When I worked for the district, we did have a director, we weren't called chiefs at that time, but someone that sat at the cabinet table that worked with ECE. And that was Dr. Sharon Davis. She's in this room, and I'm not going to look at her because she's going to be mad that I called her name. But we've been there, and we've done that, and we did it very well. And it's about developing a team relationship, not only within the building central offices, within the individual schools. So we will be working aggressively. The district will be working aggressively. To be clear, as a board member, I do not hire. The board has no responsibility or opportunity to touch personnel issues, but we support what's in the plan. We will get the best person for that job, but I just want to be clear, there are specific certifications to meet the requirements for this particular job.
I want to take a step back and think about, so we're talking about the issues that JCPS faces as a whole. So what do you two see as the challenges of JCPS, particularly as it relates to this new plan and the new data that's come out? What do the two of you see as the challenges of JCPS?
Challenges sometimes do not change, they just look a little bit different. Challenges in public education revolve around funding, the dollars that we have to make things work, how we can hire the appropriate people, and how we have enough people in place to do the work. Again, I have mentioned the fact that as the budget changes in Frankfurt, there's less of an opportunity for us to get those dollars, but our students still need those services. So challenges are there as it pertains to funding. As we look at our student population, we want to be able to meet the needs of all of our students. We have many students with mental health issues. That means that we need more mental health staff and more mental health props to help our students get past that. We have a huge homeless population. We have an international population. So it is our responsibility as a board in public education to make sure that we have money in place, we have people in place to meet the needs of the individual child. In my term as an educator and as a board member, I will always say that we have to reach the child where they are. Every child that walks in the door, it's our responsibility to embrace that child, to deal with the needs of that specific child. And we talk about, well, what's so different about education? If you're homeless and you don't know where you're going to sleep tonight, or you weren't sure where you slept the night before, if there's a lot of trauma and drama in the neighborhood where you live, we have to deal with the social emotional issues of our children. So education has changed, but our responsibility has not changed. We are committed to meeting the needs of every child. So I would say funding is always an issue, making sure that we're meeting the needs of every individual student, that we are providing the best quality education, that we are providing them access and opportunities to learn.
I would second all the points actually that Ms. Porter made, and I'll add a few to the list. Obviously, the elements that I'll talk about are not necessarily unique to JCPS in terms of challenges, but in addition to the list that Ms. Porter gave, I would add recognition. Recognition of the reality that depending on your background, depending on your circumstances, depending on the school or the classroom where a kid is in the district, that the quality of educational services provided for that child varies. And so depending on who you're talking about, depending on where you're talking about, you could talk to parents or kids who have markedly different experiences in your district, depending on where they are. That's not okay. Obviously, we understand that kids come to school with challenges, some with greater challenges than others, some that require specialized training, specialized approaches. We understand that that's a part of the public education business, in a district like Jefferson County Public Schools. Obviously, you have some unique needs and challenges that most of our other districts don't face. But the job is, regardless of what the kid comes to us with in terms of their challenges, their needs, that we are responsible for meeting kids' needs. And it's not okay for us to be satisfied with better serving kids who have better advocates, whose parents are more local, who have greater income, who live in better neighborhoods. That's simply not okay. So first, I would say is recognition of the fact that there is incredible inequity in the system. The second part is around accountability. And I start this with myself as I talk to audiences across the state. I think accountability has to start at the top and go all the way down. And so I think accountability for me is conversations I have with the State Board of Education are around education outcomes. If in this role I cannot provide evidence of the fact that we are moving in terms of outcomes in this state, then I should not be in this role anymore. And I say that as someone who has no direct influence on student learning in the classroom. But with that said, a chief state school officer, if the state is not moving in the right direction in terms of improving learning across the board, closing gaps between the performance of kids, whether those are economic gaps, race and ethnicity, disability status, if those are not closing under my leadership, then you need to find somebody else. That starts with me, and I'm going to be frank with you. That goes from the commissioner down to the classroom. We have to have greater accountability in our public education system at every single level. That's huge. It's controversial, but I'm going to be honest with you. Obviously, you know I'm not afraid to say things that people don't like. And the third thing is we have to have greater transparency. And that's whether we're talking about our practices, our policies, or the way that we spend money, the way that we allocate dollars. These are public dollars. We work for the public. We are public servants. There's nothing that we do at the state level or at the district level that ought to be behind closed doors or behind, obviously there's need for executive session and board meetings and those types of things, but the public really ought to understand what processes we are engaging in to serve kids, because there's nothing top secret here, and you guys ought to be able, as the public, ought to be able to expect and demand accountability and transparency from us.
For you, and when the test scores came out last week, you stated that for the past 5 years, there's been virtually no movement. You call the results a daunting moment of truth for Kentucky. We can't lie to ourselves about where these scores mean any longer. Can you explain that statement for the room?
Yes, ma'am. We have made little to no movement at all in terms of performance outcomes for kids across our state. Let me preface anything that I'll say further with making it clear to you that I have not and never will believe that test scores are the end-all be-all. I do not believe that test scores define children. They do not. With that said, test scores are incredibly important indicators for us. You cannot dismiss test scores. You especially cannot dismiss test scores in our state when we have outcomes data in our state, meaning not just test scores outcomes, but outcomes in terms of how our kids perform as they exit our public education system. So let me give you some outcomes data that aligns with what we see in test scores as a reason for why I think we need to pay attention to test scores. On average across our state, we send about 60% of our kids on into public education. On average across the country, that number is about 70%. That does not correlate with a state who has the highest or one of the highest high school graduation rates in the country. We graduate over 90% of our kids in Kentucky. 7th in the country, may have moved up to 6th this year. It's an incredibly high percentage. When I say that to my colleagues across the country, they're like, wow, what are you guys doing? It's something we should be proud of. But it does not make sense that we graduate so many kids when the reality is those kids are incapable of being able to move on into post-secondary education and be successful. So something's happening. So we send on average about 10% of our kids less into post-secondary education. When we think about the class of 2010 specifically, because we like to look about 7 years out, of the class of 2010, about 30% of the kids who entered post-secondary education left with any credential. That's a certificate, a diploma, a 2-year degree, or a 4-year degree, 30%. So only 60% went. And only 30% of those who went actually exit with anything. But I guarantee you they left with more debt. Yes. So they're going to leave with student debt and without a credential to be able to get a job, to be able to better take care of themselves. And we also know from our real life outcomes data that when kids exit with only a high school diploma, without a credential, without a certificate, that they make about minimum wage. Meaning they are incapable of being able to take care of themselves. And so, yes, I am excited about our 90% high school graduation rate, but I am troubled that the high school graduation rate appears to be much less of a diploma and more of a certificate of attendance if our kids are getting them like candy and they can't do anything with them after they walk across the stage. So that correlates with what we see in test scores in terms of not making movement. And so I do believe, while test scores do not define kids, that we have to pay attention to test scores. They highlight the fact that we're not making progress. They highlight the fact that incredible achievement gaps persist. Economically, race and ethnicity, disability status, and we have to do more to address those deficiencies. I'll cite just one more, and I'll allow Ms. Porter to speak. You know, about 50% of our kids across Kentucky in reading score at the proficient level or higher. About 50%. In mathematics, it's less than 50%. For African American kids, scoring at the proficient or higher in mathematics, it's 26%. For reading, it's in the 30s. That's across our state. Your scores at JCPS, they're not significantly different than that. But I would say to you that that's nothing to congratulate ourselves about. We should be alarmed about the performance across our state as well as performance in the district. We simply have to do better. This is not about shaming schools or shaming teachers or shaming leaders. This is about the reality that we're talking about outcomes for our kids. And if we can't improve learning and outcomes for our kids, they simply will not be able to take care of themselves. That's not what we want for our kids or for our commonwealth, for your community.
Thank you. I want to say that as we talk about being transparent, it's to me it's about being honest about where we are and where we're going. Dr. Polio presented us with our test scores on Tuesday. I continue to look at my individual schools. I continue to make a list of questions that I take to Dr. Dossett. I visit my schools. I want to know what's going on. And I just want to highlight the areas of growth that were given to us by Dr. Polio. He's here, he's going to speak for himself, but I just want to throw these out here. He will probably go more in depth when he speaks. We need to improve in proficiency rates, which is what Dr. Lewis has said. We need to work harder to close the achievement gap across student groups. That means our racial groups, our students with disabilities. We need to increase the percentage of students who are transition ready, those that are leaving high school to move forward. What have we done well? Because a lot of times we dwell on only the negatives. We need to look at both sides of the coin and talk about both sides of the coin. And I clearly support that test scores are the numbers that we have received. It does not determine our destiny. When we get those scores, we look at them, and the next day, our staff gets up, shows up to work with our students. We do not close the door on schools because of test scores. Some of the positive things that have happened in JCPS. All 3 levels reduced the percentages of novices in reading. 101 schools showed reductions. Middle school proficiency rates in reading is at an all-time high. It's the highest it's been since 2012. Our elementary growth scores are above the state average. The performance of JCPS schools in the lowest performing category reduced by 34% from 75% of state-identified priority schools to 41% of the state-identified CSI schools. Graduation rate in Jefferson County increased to 81.6%. So there are the negatives, areas of growth, and there are the positive. What are some of the things that we are doing about that? We are working to put more dual credit courses in our high schools, so as our students graduate from high school and they go to college, they are in fact college ready. They will have earned classes at the college level. I had an opportunity to meet a young lady that graduated from Western High School last year. She earned 60+ college credits. She is now a student at the University of Louisville. She's there on a scholarship. So we have graduated one. I'm not saying everyone had that same opportunity, but there are success stories in our district. So we're working to improve the dual credit courses and to increase those. Dr. Polio will probably talk about it. You may have heard about the academies of Louisville as we talk about career and technical education. We are working aggressively with our business partners to put students in learning opportunities. There was just a big program that opened at Valley High School with manufacturing with UPS. So our goal is to make sure that all of our students have an opportunity so that there is the access and the opportunity. Every student will not go to college, but they will be career ready. As we talk about our backpack of success skills, our students have to talk about what they've learned in elementary school, what they've learned in middle school, what they've learned in high school. A lot of times people will say, well, kids don't talk anymore. They don't look at me in the eye. They're not verbal. They don't articulate. Well, they will be, because they're going to have that opportunity. And we're going to listen to them. And that's a part of learning now in JCPS as we talk about the backpack of skills. Those are just a few of the things I wanted to bring in closer to what we are doing in our district.
Thank both of you. And so the next question I have for you all, and the last question kind of my questions is, how do you plan to improve relations between the local community and the state as the district and state carries out the settlement between KDE and JCPS?
For the first time in a long time, this community has stood with us for public education. For that, we are grateful. I was an employee of the district for 39 years before I became a school board member. You would always see people and they're like, oh gosh, you know, you're in public education, you know, sad face, sad face. There are no sad faces. There are people that are standing up for education in Louisville, Kentucky, and for that, we are most grateful. Give yourselves a round of applause. In my heart and in my soul, I know that we cannot do this by ourselves. For those of you that raised your hand and said that you have children, some are in school, some are out of school, the need remains the same. Whether you have students that show up now, whether your students have graduated, whether you're grandparents and spoiling your children beyond recognition, they're going to come to school as well. So we need your support. We are there for you. We have been visible in this community. We are available. Our board meetings happen usually twice a month. You're not always there. We would love to see you at a board meeting so you can understand better and be closer related to what's going on. But I am not going to complain because for once I feel that this community has stood up for education, for public education in the Jefferson County Public Schools. It's our responsibility to keep that fire alive, to be available, to keep you engaged and involved, because without you, we will not be successful. And it's not about me being successful, it's about our students being successful. So from all levels, from businesses, from higher education, from homes, from everywhere, we need your help, we need your support. So when we call, please answer the phone.
I think that it is incredibly important that we're all, and when I say all, I mean the Department of Education, JCPS, the community is able to come together, work together for the benefit of our kids. I believe that we're working toward the same goal. I'll tell you that a lot of times contention that gets played out in the media doesn't always match reality. And there's a lot more conversation and collaboration that goes on in real life than you might be led to believe. I don't have any concerns about, as a department, our relationship with JCPS. In fact, I think we have a solid relationship with JCPS that will continue to move forward, continue to improve. We have, as a department, the Department of Education, we have an incredible number of staff who come to work in a JCPS school every day, that serve your kids every day, that many of you probably interact with and may not realize necessarily that they are KDE employees. But we will continue, and trust me, that you will continue to see me, not just KDE staff, but you'll see me. It's important for me personally to be here In forums like this, you'll see me in your schools, you'll see me in your communities. And so I'm encouraged about what collaboration and relationships look like moving forward.
To me, I do have another question. Given the settlement was reached just 1 month ago, can you point to any areas of progress that have already been made, or alternatively, any areas of concern?
The settlement was made a month ago. We were given the charge of taking care of completing the corrective action plans, which Dr. Lewis has spoken to, which our staff worked very hard with staff from KDE to get those corrective action plans. So I'm happy to hear that when they made it to Dr. Lewis's desk, that things were in order and in place. And one of the people that I can thank that's in this room is Dr. Dina Dossett for the hours that she put into that. But it was us working together, and I would want you to walk away knowing that we are working together. We are not being demanded to do anything. We are working together. Working together, we can accomplish much. Some of the work was already in place before we started the corrective action plans, and I'll let Dr. Polio speak more specifically to that, but we were already working on some of the things as it pertains to ECE, as it pertains to career and technical education. The work had already started for some of the work that was submitted in the corrective action plans. As it pertained to hiring the chief for ECE, the conversation was already in place about that, but it made it more specific that we would do that because it was recommended to us, and there was no problem with that. So again, because Dr. Polio is here and because I left my corrective action plans in the car, I'm not going to sit here and make up stuff, because when you go back and say, Evelyn has no idea what she's talking about, and you all need to lock the door and not let her in. The corrective action plans that I have, thank you, are about this thick. So I do have them, and I have read them, and I will continue to read them because it's a work in progress. And the good thing about what the board gets from this is staff does the work, but we get updated. So we know what the work is, so we are aware. We're not just going to wait until 2020 to find out what's going on. We get updates so we are aware of what's going on as we take this journey together.
I'm really pleased with the progress we've made thus far, and I don't have concerns at this point. If I do have a concern, then I send Dr. Polio a text and we talk. That's how we work through concerns or questions, and the same goes with him. So I'm pleased with our progress.
Just so you all know, for everyone that registered through Eventbrite, you will get the corrective action plan through an email. So that's one of the links that will go out after the session ends today. So we've got some questions I'm going to try to work through. And the first question is, what is included in the backpack of skills?
The backpack of skills may look different for every student that's in the classroom. It's what they have been able to achieve, what is their success story. If they've done artwork and that has something to do with what they're learning, they will put this in the backpack. Now, the other thing I don't want you to leave with thinking that we're loading kids and they're going to have broken backs by the time they graduate from high school. The backpack of success skills is digital. So everything is online for you to look at the success that they've made. So anything that they've done, if it's a speech, if it's a piece of art, if they've successfully completed a test, they can determine, working with their teacher, what will be loaded in the backpack of skills. So there's not one size for every student. It's showing their success and their growth in the individual classrooms. They're not wearing it on their back. It's online, it is digital, and we are excited about the concept of how we are developing learning, and they will speak to what's in their backpack. That's something else. As it goes in the backpack, when I talk about leaving elementary, middle, and high school, they will address the things that are in their backpack, why they put them in there, why that was a part of their learning process.
Teach to the test and teach to the kid, meaning meet the kid where they are academically and progressively, bringing them to where they need to be. I guarantee you will see improvement. Another assessment is not the answer. you want to speak to that statement? It's not a question, it's a statement. Do you want to speak to that statement?
So I think the question is referring to the conversation we've had around high school graduation requirements with the reading and mathematics assessment. I'm thinking, Dr. Rivers, you think, is that probably, okay. So first to clarify, we have not proposed another assessment, to be clear. Both federal and state law at the high school level require that we assess reading, mathematics, science, and social studies once at the high school level. We have not proposed an assessment in addition to measuring those academic standards as we are required by state and federal law. State law permits us the flexibility at the state level to assess those academic standards either through end-of-course assessments, as we've used in the past, or end-of-span assessments, which are tests that come at particular grade levels. In the past, up to last year, we were administering 4 end-of-course assessments in Kentucky high schools. Those were in Algebra 2, English 2, U.S. History, and Biology. Beginning this year, we have suspended the use of end-of-course assessments. Okay? There are a couple reasons why we made that decision. One, the end-of-course assessments that we've used for the last couple of years across Kentucky are bought off the shelf and not aligned to Kentucky academic standards. And so we've been using assessments to test standards, or saying that we're testing standards, when in fact they do not test our standards. So it's not a good practice. The other thing is, as you know, I am moving and recommending to the board to adopt high school graduation requirements that permit greater flexibility in the courses that kids take. And so if you provide greater flexibility in courses that kids get to choose, you can't use end-of-course assessments, because even if I don't require the course, if I require the assessment, I'm essentially requiring the course. So if I continue with the U.S. History end-of-course assessment, while I've said you have the flexibility to choose what 3 courses you want to take in social studies, I've really kind of picked one of the courses for you. So I'm moving to recommend it to the board. They'll consider again this week coming end-of-span assessments for reading and mathematics and for science and social studies. For reading and mathematics, those would come at the 10th grade level. And for science and social studies, those would come at the 11th grade level. They would test Kentucky's academic standards. That is what state law requires that they test. In fact, state law requires that our assessments in Kentucky test only Kentucky academic standards. We're not permitted to test anything outside of those.
This question speaks to actually Dr. Lewis, your comments around end of span. So it's about your comments around high school degrees being handed out like candy, but also acknowledging not having a high school diploma can wreak irreparable harm on students' futures. The question is, how will adding a comprehensive exit exam and stricter criteria in order to receive a high school diploma, without adding in any support and resources to ensure students have what they need to succeed, which results in fewer graduates, especially our most vulnerable students, help close our achievement gap and not lead further to the pipeline of prison? Yeah.
So first, the few things that have to be clarified. One, I've never proposed a comprehensive exit examination. Not true. What we have proposed is the reading and mathematics end-of-span assessments that I just talked about, that in addition to those tests being used for accountability purposes, as we're required, we report performance levels on all of our assessments, as you guys know, at the novice, apprentice, proficient, and distinguished level. But, you know, a little bit of response here, just to make sure everybody understands. So, Kentucky law requires first that academic standards are developed by Kentucky teachers. The Kentucky Department of Education does not write academic standards. We bring together teams of teachers from across the state, writing teams to write academic standards. We then recommend those standards to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education ultimately approves Kentucky academic standards. It is also important to know, because I think there was a little bit of confusion in some earlier conversation today, that Kentucky is one of those unique states that says that the state is responsible for developing academic standards, but the state is not permitted in Kentucky to develop curriculum. In fact, in Kentucky, local districts don't have the authority to develop and implement curriculum. By Kentucky law, school-based decision-making councils have statutory authority over curriculum. So what we're talking about at the state level are standards, right? Standards are kind of expectations for what we want kids to learn. The meat on the bones in terms of what kids are actually learning, from materials, textbooks, those types of things, those by law have to come at the school level, at the SBDM council level. So the Kentucky law requires that teachers develop those standards. Kentucky law also requires that teachers write assessments. We bring in, do an RFP and bring in a vendor, but that vendor works with Kentucky teachers to develop assessments. As well, we bring in Kentucky teachers and as well as administrators to help us decide what those performance levels need to be. So the cuts that we use to determine what is novice, proficient, distinguished, those are set as well, ultimately by the State Board of Education, but upon recommendation of educators from across the state. What I'm proposing for reading and math now, in addition to the novice, proficient, distinguished categories, is that we set a minimum cut score on the reading and mathematics assessments that is proposed to ensure that a kid receiving a Kentucky high school diploma can demonstrate basic competence in reading and in mathematics. Because the reality is today, and I understand the concern with the question, you know, you're proposing this assessment that's gonna stop our kids from graduating. No, I'm proposing a minimum bar and saying we need to get the kids there so they can graduate. Because I'm not okay with us continuing to hand kids pieces of paper, walking them across the stage and having a high school graduation rate if that diploma doesn't mean something. So what I'm proposing, and I'll be frank with you, is not a high bar. It is a low bar. I'm proposing a low bar to say that we cannot graduate kids who cannot demonstrate basic competence in reading and mathematics. I'm not saying kids have to score at the proficient level even on the 10th grade assessment. Because the cut score will be, to be frank with you, will be below proficient. That's what I'm proposing. In addition, one of the things I think has not been discussed about the assessment requirement that I'm proposing for reading and mathematics is that there are appeals processes built in. So first, the kids would begin taking it at the end of the 10th grade year because at that point, they would have taken all the academic content that they need to be successful on that exam. Again, it's not a high bar test. The other reason they start taking it at the 10th grade level is because they'd have additional 2 times to take it at the 11th grade and an additional 2 times to take it at the 12th grade level. In addition to that, there's built into it an appeals process where a student would be able to submit to the local superintendent, not to me, they're not sending them to me, but to the local superintendent, submit an appeal with a portfolio where if it's just a testing issue, because some of our kids do have testing issues, but if it's a testing issue, they can demonstrate through a portfolio that the kid can in fact demonstrate basic competence in reading and mathematics, and the superintendent would be able to approve that appeal. In addition to that appeal, there's an appeal that we built in that says if a kid has scored at the proficient level in reading and or mathematics on the 8th grade test, the superintendent can approve the appeal and the kid can move on. So these conversations, friends, this is one of those examples where sound bites don't really do a whole lot of justice. Because people will give you a bullet and tell you he's proposing this, he wants to stop our kids from graduating. And as you see from this conversation, there's a lot more to this proposal. The other thing, this wasn't a part of the question, but let me add, the folks have been saying, you know, he's trying to rush this through and is not talking to anybody. This process has been underway since about February. It actually started under my predecessor. In constructing the profile of a graduate, collecting feedback from business and industry, from stakeholders across the state, that have informed this as well. When I came in April, it was one of the first things I started to talk about. I was begging the media and folks to talk to me about high school graduation requirements. And you know what they told me? No, let's talk about charter schools. I've been trying to get folks to talk to me about this. But with that said, the second reading of the regulation comes next week. As with any regulation adopted by the Kentucky Board of Education, what follows that, if they approve it, is a public comment period. There's a 30-day public comment period. This is for any regulation that we approve. As a part of that public comment period, there's the opportunity for you guys to submit comments in person. You can send them in electronically. As well, there will be a public hearing where people can show up and can give feedback. And then the board is required to consider every single comment that comes in regarding the regulation. And with a statement of consideration, give consideration to every comment before what we think would be the December board meeting, where the board typically makes changes, sometimes minor, sometimes major, to a regulation before it moves on to approval or review by a legislative committee. So yes, this is the second reading of the regulation of a process that we've been working on since February, but it's not the end. We'll take public comment in a public comment period, and the board will consider it again. It's one part of the process. So we have additional questions there as well. I'm more than happy to talk about it.
So I'm going to read this as it's written. It says, look at the audience today. A district whose population of administrators and teachers that are now minority. When race is discussed, this is how the audience looks. How will culture and climate be improved in this area under the agreement?
How will culture and climate be improved?
Just how will it be improved? Give it. I'm not talking about how will culture and climate be improved, if at all, given the issues that JCPS faces. Is that one of the issues that you all are looking to address? The question really asks just how will culture and climate be improved?
Okay, Dr. Polio can speak longer on this. When we hired Dr. Polio, he came to us with a plan and some things that he talked to us immediately about, and culture and climate is one of the things that he talked about. Increasing operational efficiency is the other, and deeper learning is the other. So those are the things that he brought to us. Culture and climate means how do I feel when I walk in a building? How does staff feel about showing up to work every day? So how will we work on that? We work on that continuously. Dr. Polio is in schools every week visiting, walking buildings to see what's going on. We've heard the opportunity of, as we talk about our chief of schools and our turnaround office, that we're not calling a turnaround office anymore. I'm sorry, I don't have the right name right now. But there are teams of JCPS staff that are going into schools to build in relationships. You know, there was once upon a time, here they come with their notepad and their pencil to write us up. That's not the intent. The intent is to be in school, to develop relationships, to work together with the school staff to improve what's going on in the school, to develop a plan collectively. It's not one person, there are multiple people making these school visits. It's about relationships as we talk about culture and climate. As we build culture and climate, we have to build relationships. No relationships means that things do not get done well. They will get done, but they will not get done well. If I am a valued staff member, if I am given the things that I need, if I say that I need some additional supports, that not only builds relationships, it changes the culture and climate. The culture and climate and the expectation is that all of our students will learn that every day is not a good day, but we get up and we go back to school the next day, and our focus is on embracing the child, encouraging the child, and educating the child every day. So it's not a close of business. We're done with culture and climate. Our relationships, it's every day. We work to develop those and to meet the needs of our staff, school by school, program by program, and child by child, to make sure that we are doing quality education in the Jefferson County Public Schools.
This is going to be the last question in the answer portion, but as I mentioned, they will email a response to you. So this question is, what results will have to be met by the 2020-21 school year for the KDE JCPS agreement to have reached success? So they're asking what's the measure of success by 2021.
So let me differentiate a little bit in terms of how I respond. Regardless of whether there was an agreement, regardless of whether there was an audit, my expectation for Jefferson County Public Schools is the same as it is for any other district in the state, and that is we improve education outcomes for our kids, we improve on measures of student learning, that we close achievement gaps, and that regardless of the kid's background and where they go to school, they are being served well. That's across the board, regardless of whether or not there's a settlement agreement in place. Now, in addition to that expectation, regarding the settlement agreement, in 2 years, what would need to happen, what we need to see is implementation with fidelity of the plan that we've agreed to. We have agreed on the plan. We've agreed on what steps the district is going to move forward with. We are continuing to support the district in those things. And it's not just, frankly, not just 2 years down the road, but this is a continuous monitoring and feedback loop where we're continuing to look at the progress that we're making. But 2 years specifically, we want to be able to look back and say, that was the plan, and we did in fact do it. It really is that simple. Have we done what we agreed to doing 2 years ago? Some of the deficiencies, some of the challenges that the district faces, they are incredible. I mean, they are to the place where you cannot reasonably expect for it to be fixed in 2 years. And so the idea that everything is fixed in 2 years is not the expectation. It's not feasible. But there needs to be implementation of the plan with fidelity. And I'll tell you what success would look like for me in 2 years is we do that review and there's no more need for KDE to have as deep a relationship in what the district is doing as what we're doing now. That means there's no more need for an agreement, there's no need for state assistance, for state management, and that there aren't nearly as many CSI schools in Jefferson County. That's what success would look like for me.
I think I support what Dr. Lewis has said as we work toward 2020, but there will be a 2021 and there will be a 2022. Education does not stop in 2020. It did not start when we received the information about the work that we're going to be doing for the next 2 years. We must remain devoted and committed to education. And did you say this was the last question?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I'm going to do my 30-second public service announcement. Okay. Let me say how honored I am to serve on the Jefferson County Board of Education. I've been a board member for 8 years. When I signed on, I promised people 4, and everybody laughed at me, and I could not understand why people laughed at me, but then they said, you don't get it done in 4. The reality of it is you don't get it done, but you continue to work. So I am committed to being on the Jefferson County Board of Education after being an educator for 39 years. I want to speak to my district because a lot of things are said about access, opportunity, and things that are made available for our school or for our students. I live in West Louisville, and I am proud to say that if you've not been there, come. It's more than west of 9th Street. We have things that are great. We have things that are not so great. And we are working every day. But I commit to you, West Louisville, East Louisville, South Louisville, North Louisville, education happens every day. I speak loud and hard for the students that live in my district, whether they go to school around the corner or whether they get on the bus and they go across town. I know students need more. My commitment is to the students. I'm not looking for another job. Thank you. don't ask me, but I am giving this 110%. There was an opportunity when I could have stopped doing this. I made the decision to keep doing this because it's important. People that are on the Board of Education must have passion, must have compassion, must have determination. You know, there's the nice me and there's the not nice me when it comes to talking about my students, and I will never apologize for that. This is work that must be done. Thank you for the opportunity.
I want to thank Ms. Porter and Dr. Lewis for their time and their conversation. I'm going to bring up Senator Neal now, and then he's going to move us to our next.
Gentlemen, another round of applause for this.